Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Google for Education series. This is the Google Classroom Communicate and Engaging with Students section. I'm Geminatu Olabisama, and I manage our service partnerships on the Google for Education team. And I'd like to introduce Andy Caffrey and Emma Pass, who are Google certified trainers from the EdTech team UK. We have really special guests here with us from the Outward Grange Academies Trust, Ben Barnes, who's our Director of Computer Science, as well as Glennis Peacock, who's the Assistant Principal for Teaching and Learning. We're going to go a little bit through our Google for Education pieces, products, just so you know a little bit more about it, and then pass it over to Andy to do a demo of Google Classroom, and then our schools to talk about how they're continuing learning at home, and then I'll give you guys a chance for Q&A. So Google for Education helps everyone foster the future of learning. So we want you to remember that G Suite for Education is our productivity tool set. That includes Chromebooks, which is our devices, and then Google Classroom. That is the class content, the teacher driving force, and our mission control. And so that's a great way for teachers to be able to bring your content to life, share your class assignments, and be able to close the feedback loop with students so that they can also interact with you during this time. We've put together a set of distance learning events so that you can always access our webinars and virtual office hours. So if you miss any webinar through the next few weeks, always go back to bit.ly GFE UK webinars to register for our virtual office hours, as well as reach out to see any more of our webinars that we've had over the next few weeks. We've also put together a Teach from Home hub to just make sure all the teachers and students have a place where there's tips and resources for them to help during this COVID-19 crisis. So for school closures, teachers can also make sure that they go on this website, have all the access to all of our tools and guidance on how to make sure that you continue learning throughout this time. So remember to go to teachfromhome.google. Next bit is our new first day content. As a teacher, you can go to our Teacher Center, and any product that you're interested in or you need more support on or professional development on, you can also have access to that at our Teaching Center. And it's a great directory for our communities as well as mini courses. So if you want to have your first day of classroom and learn how to use the tool properly, make sure you access that on g.co/teachercenter. Then finally, if you want to continue learning, you can set up 8 short lessons that are delivered straight to your inbox. On the teachercenter.withgoogle.com/getting started, you can have access to that, and 8 short lessons will come straight to you so that you can continue learning and making sure your lessons and content being delivered through our products are seamless. I'm going to pass it over to Andy to do a demo of Google Classroom.
Hi everyone, thanks Gem. And what we're going to do now is just have a dive into Google Classroom and take a look at the product in a bit more detail. So as it was mentioned at the bottom of the screen a little bit earlier, you can get to Google Classroom by simply on any device going to classroom.google.com, or if you're already signed to Google, you can go to the waffle button and press the Classroom icon. But here I am at Google Classroom and I've just landed on this page. I'm just going to take you through slowly the process of creating a class to start with. Some users might come in and find their classes have been created for them already. Some schools will bulk create all the classes in the system for teachers, but let's assume that that hasn't happened. You haven't been that lucky. And so you need to start by creating a class. So we're going to go to the plus button at the top right-hand side and press Create Class. And that's then going to give us some boxes to give some information about the class. The very minimum we need to add on this page is the class name. So when we're on this page, we just simply need to put in the name of my class, geography, If I can spell it correctly. And the other information here is optional. I can put in information about the room I'm teaching if I want to, teaching in E7. And once I press create, Google goes away and creates a Google Classroom for me. So Google's going away in the background and creating this area for me to communicate with my class. Google Classroom is essentially a teaching and learning hub, a space that you and your students can come to find out what's going on in your lessons, or obviously in this case, perhaps the distance learning that's taking place between you and your class. So here I am on the home page of Google Classroom, and this is what we call the stream page, and it's where most of the activity takes place. We're going to just talk about people first. We're going to come back to stream in just a second. So I just want to go over to the people page, because the first big thing right now is I'm in a Google Classroom and I'm the only person in there. So I need to have some more other people added in. So over on the people page, that's where I can add other teachers and my students. So to bring in other teachers who might be co-teaching the class with me, or if my head of department wants to see what's happening in my class, I can do that on this page by pressing the plus button, popping their email address and inviting them in. And I can do exactly the same thing with students down below here. This is a one-time process where we need to press the plus button again, and we can just put the students' email addresses in and invite them in that way. Now, if the students are around or there's other ways of communicating with students, the other option for bringing students in is to give them this invite code down the bottom here. So we can get students, if I was in a traditional normal teaching environment and the students were coming into a computer room, I might get them to go to Google Classroom, press the plus button and put the code in. So I think under the normal teaching circumstances, the code is the best way of getting students to join. But obviously we're now facing the distance learning potential. So I think in this situation, I'd probably use the emails to add students in. But either way, I'm going to end up where this page contains the teachers of my class and the students in my class. So let's now talk about the stream page. So this is where all the activity happens in Google Classroom. And as you can see, just starting at the top here, it's come up with a graphic for my class based on my name of my class. It's found me a nice geographical graphic for the top. And then below that, I can share notices with my class if I want to tell them something. So I can add here, welcome to my class. That's just an announcement. And I can just on the bottom right-hand side here, press the button to post that into the stream. And then that notice, just very similar to a social media type network, goes in at the top of the class stream. So in this space, it's a place where me and my students can communicate with each other. And that's because I've chosen to allow students to communicate in the class stream. So let me just explain about settings. Teachers have some choices as to what appear in the class stream. So I'm going to go over to the settings area. And here in the class settings, I can do a few things. I can rename my class if I got the name wrong, or add some more information. And down here under stream, I have three choices. So students can post and comment, allow students as well to post on that stream page or leave a response to my post. Students can only comment, allows them only to respond to things I've put in the stream. And finally, only teachers can post a comment, locks the whole thing down. So effectively that stream just becomes teacher messaging to students without any ability for students to respond to that messaging. When I'm back in normal school environment, some teachers use the teachers can only post and comment. But I think right now when we're dealing with distance learning, it's a good idea to have the stream set to students can post and comment so that that interaction can take place and that students can say, I'm having a problem with this. I've got a question. Could you help me with this? So my advice right now through the distance learning period is to leave it on students can post and comment. And I'll talk about moderation of that in just a second. Then you've got some other options here, and one that's really new, and for anyone who hasn't looked at Google Classroom in the last week and a half, may not have seen this, but we now have an integration between Google Meet, which is Google's video calling tool, and Google Classroom. So you can see down here, I've got a Google Meet section, and I have the ability to turn on to generate a Meet link, which will be a link to a video call, and I have the ability to make this link visible or not visible to students, depending on whether I want to use Google Meet as part of my teaching. Tomorrow, at the same time, we're doing a detailed dive into Google Meet. So if you want to learn more about Google Meet, the webinar is exactly the same time tomorrow. But what you really need to know from a classroom point of view is it's here in settings that we can choose to turn that link on or turn that link off and make it visible to students. So when I press save on this now, because I've turned my Google Meet link on, here it is in that banner at the top of my Google Classroom. In the banner area, I now have a link that students could go to if we're going to do a live video lesson for Google Meet. So that's the Google Meet feature within there. And then we've got the stream feature over here. Now, of course, what teachers often think through when we think about students having access to the stream is, well, that's great, but what happens if some student puts something inappropriate in my stream? So here's a classroom that's a real one that's got some people in. And we can see here there was a post earlier, and then this particular student, Wise Old Elf here, has posted the answers to a question in my classroom stream. And I might not want that to happen. I might think, well, I don't really want the rest of my class seeing the answers to my quiz or whatever I put in there. So I have some options as a teacher. I have some options through the three little dots at the end here. I can firstly delete the comment, so I could remove that comment from the stream so no one else can see it. Secondly, if maybe this person is consistently doing this, maybe Wise Old Elf permanently annoys me by putting the answers to questions in, I can at this point go to mute Wise Old Elf, and then he can't post anymore in the stream. So the rest of my class can post and partake and have the conversation, but maybe he's used up his 2 chances and I'm going to mute him off the stream. So even though I've got students being able to comment on that stream page, as a teacher, I'm still totally in control of what goes in there in terms of, you know, whether I delete a comment, whether I mute a student. But I think it's good in these sort of distance learning times to have that space for interaction around the stream page. So the stream, obviously I can put my own comments in there, my students can put comments in there, and we can have that interaction in that space about what's going on in our lessons. I would say one of the main areas of Google Classroom that we often end up using is the classwork page. And so my colleague Emma, who's joining me on the call, is about to take us through how she uses classwork to assign work to students. So hi, Emma.
Hi, Andy.
How are you? You good?
Yes, thank you for going over the stream. I like to tell people in a distance learning environment, I consider this stream like the 4 walls of my classroom. It's the place where my students have conversation and we build community. So I absolutely love the stream, but I do spend the most of my time in the classwork tab. So I'm going to go over assigning work to students, collecting work, and grading with my nice big mouse here for you to see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, navigate to the second tab over. This is our classwork. And then I'm going to create, big plus sign here in the top left, a new assignment. So when I click that button, I get this assignment shell. And the first thing I'm going to do is give it a title. And I'm going to do really detailed instructions. Of course, when you do this live, you'll give better instructions than that. And then you need to attach some sort of work for your students to actually interact with. With this add button, you have a couple different options of types of work you can assign. First, you can search directly within YouTube to find an instructional video for students to watch. You can attach a file from your computer. So that might be an image or a PDF you have saved on your computer itself. You can link to another website. So if you have your students working on MyMaths, I always create the assignment here first. I tell them what I want them to do on that site and then link them over there so that they can access that website directly from Google Classroom. However, mostly what I do is I'm creating work in my Google Drive and I'm attaching it directly from my Google Drive here. And I can search within my drive and find any file type that I've already saved within there. Another nice feature within the assignment is you can create Google files directly into the assignment. So a blank doc, slide deck, drawing, or form. In this case, if I'm having my student work on an essay, I can create a new blank Google Doc. I can give it a title. I can say this is your essay assignment. Oops. And that will save directly into my Google Drive. Now, once the assignment is attached, you have 3 different choices scrolling over to the right in terms of how you want your students to interact with that file. The first option is students can view the file. That's as if you held up a poster to them that they could look at, but they can't touch it, they can't interact with it. It's just for viewing only. Second option down is students can edit this file, meaning this one single file. They can all work on it together at the same time. That's as if you took a big piece of poster paper, set it down in front of them, and each gave them a marker, and they could write on it together. This can be a little bit crazy to do with a whole class, but it's really great for small group work. And then finally, you can make a copy for each student. So that's as if you took that one doc and went to the copy machine and made 30 or more copies and gave one to each of your students. That case, they each have their own individual file. It will save in your drive as well as theirs, and you'll both have access to it. So you can see their file at any time, and they also have the access to edit it and make changes. Now, once you have the work attached, over here in this right-hand column, you have a couple different assignment settings. The first one at the top says for. You can decide who this work is for in terms of which classes. I'm a secondary English teacher, so this option was really nice for me when I taught several sections of the same class. You can select multiple classrooms to post to at the exact same time. Saves you a little bit of time in recreating or reusing work. Next to that, there's the option to decide which students are going to receive this work. You can unselect your entire class and then go through and choose individual groups to assign assignments to. Or this is really great for differentiating assignments. If you have work you need to accommodate a student to, then you can assign something to the entire class except for that one student, and then create a new assignment just for that individual student. So there's a lot of options here in terms of differentiating and accommodations. You can assign point values, a due date, and then topic is a really nice feature to point out because it helps keep you organized within Google Classroom. You can choose a pre-existing topic or even create a new one. So I'll show you what that looks like. We'll say a Unit 1 topic. And then below that, there's a couple new features. The first one is to create a rubric. This is just a really simple rubric structure, just like you're probably familiar with creating on paper or within an Excel spreadsheet. You can create a new rubric or even reuse one from the past. So I'm going to go in and you can see I've already created a rubric for an essay assignment. I can select that. And then when I jump into this rubric, you'll see I can create criteria and point values. And if there's any changes I need to make to this specific assignment, I can edit that rubric right here. When I'm ready to assign my work, I'm going to turn my attention back up to that top right-hand corner. I can either assign it immediately, which means the students will be able to see the work that moment on their classwork tab. Or with this drop-down arrow, I can schedule that work to post at a specific day and time. This is the feature I use for assigning work most often. I'm usually creating my work a day in advance, and then I'm scheduling it to post that next day or next week at some time in the morning when I think it's a reasonable time for my students to be up and working. But for now, I'm going to directly assign this to our class tab. And we should see we have this new topic here that I created within the assignment. It's also nice to note that these can be rearranged by dragging and dropping, as well as the assignments within the topics can also be rearranged by dragging and dropping. So that helps you just stay a little bit more organized within your Google Classroom. Once the work is assigned, your students have until the due date to complete that work. And then as the teacher, when you're ready to collect and grade it, you click into the assignment, and down here in the bottom left of the assignment window, you say View Assignment. You'll see all of your students in this left-hand column, as well as a little preview of their work right here in the middle. You can sort your students by name, by status, and then when you're going to grade, you can click into an individual student. You'll see our rubric is attached. I'm going to go into her essay assignment. Now what happens here is because this work is shared between us in our drives, when you open it within Google Classroom, it automatically places the teacher in suggesting mode. So any changes I make within the document are tracked, and there's a little comment box that appears in the right-hand side. Now, one thing Google noticed is teachers tend to make the same comments over and over again to their students. And so they created a comment bank within Google Classroom for you to access those commonly used comments. All you have to do is click the pound sign, or the hash key as we know it more commonly today, and you'll see your comment bank drop down for you to select one of those commonly used comments, and you can directly reply to your student right in the side box here. To add comments to your comment bank, look at this small column in the right-hand side, and you'll see this little chat bubble with a tag in it. And this is where you can add additional comments to your comment bank. Then back in our grading section, you'll see the rubric that we created earlier, or reused in this case, is already attached. And I simply have to click in to the corresponding boxes, and Google Classroom will auto-calculate that score here. And when I'm ready to return that work to the student, all I have to do is click this big blue button, return. And if we go back into our Google Classroom, in the far right-hand column, we'll have a grade book. Each assignment gets a new grade, and you'll see there's that SA2 and the 80% grade that I just returned to my student. There are a bunch of different options for creating assignments within Google Classroom. That was the basic shell, but you can also create a quiz assignment directly within here that attaches a Google form to create really quick and easy quizzes. A single multiple choice or short answer question for getting quick formative feedback. You can just create a material that you want your students to look at, but not actually do work to. And then finally, you can reuse any post that you've used in any class from the past. So if there was a great assignment you used in a Google Classroom last year or even last week, you can find that class and reuse that assignment again and again and again. And those are the basics of classwork and grading in Google Classroom.
Questions have been answered in the live chat. So if you have any more, keep it there. We have Dean from our team that's answering faster than we can, but showing how to reuse classes. Just reiterating that, and then a little bit around rubrics. So I think that was really good. Anything else from anyone before we move on?
No, I saw some questions about, I think the reuse post button, which Emma showed under assignment and reuse post, becomes probably your main post, because that's the one you can go to once you've already set something to one class, to set it to a class again and again and again. So I would say after your first run through a classroom, like in year 2, it's just all reuse posts from last year, reuse posts. That's a really big time saver for teachers.
I use reuse post almost every day.
So I hope that answered that question. But if any other questions, people drop them in the chat. Oh, do students get to the rubric so they know to aim for a higher mark? Yes. When there is an assignment and you've attached a rubric. And the rubric's quite an American name, and I tend to call them level descriptors. Oh, there I am. I'm above the title now. But, I tend to call them level descriptors. So you're just saying to students, to get this grade, here's the sort of things I might want to see. For this grade bound, here's what I might want to see. And that's the more common term in the UK. But yeah, If you put those onto an assignment, those come out for students to see, and they can themselves aim for that.
And I typically, within my instructions, I ask students, look at the rubric and tell me where you think you'll fall, because that rubric is attached for them and viewable to them. So as a part of the assignment, I usually say, you need to look at the rubric and tell me how you think you did.
And then this question, can you do all of these in just Google Docs slides? Does it work only in Google Classroom? So what we're doing when we're using the attachments is we're attaching Google Drive Docs files and Google Slides files, but you can attach any sort of file format you want. And students can also hand in a variety of formats. So certainly at the moment, I'm seeing students photograph artwork and hand that into Google Classroom, do written work and put that in. It can be anything at all that can be stored in Google Drive that can be handed into Classroom. And that probably answers that next question already, which is, where's the work stored? It's stored inside Google Drive. So as a teacher or as a user, Google Classroom creates a folder called Classroom in your Drive, and it all effectively goes into Google Drive. But my real big recommendation to teachers is to use the Classroom interface, which provides the ability to move from student to student quickly and the ability to grade down the right-hand side, rather than being tempted to go into the Drive and go from the folder. It's far easier to use things from Classroom. Emma, do you agree?
I agree. I always recommend that teachers and students ignore their classroom folder in Drive, just because all of it is in Classroom and it's a lot more easy to navigate within Classroom.
Yeah. Great. Well, any other questions?
All
Pop
right.
in the chat.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, guys. Next up, we're going to pass it out to Outwood Grange School. So we'll have Ben and Glynis.
Hi, everyone. We're just going to give you a little bit of an overview about how our Multi-Academy Trust is dealing with home learning. Now, we are obviously quite a large Multi-Academy Trust. However, what we've applied for the home learning is probably applicable to any size of school, trust, or whatever. So I'm just wondering if we've got a technical issue because it looks a little bit blurry to me. Okay, just bear with me 1 second while we just sort out these small errors. Okay, so just to give a little bit of an overview, Outwood Grange Academies Trust is based in north of England. We've got 33 academies in total, and we've got 10 primary and 23 secondary. So most of our academies are in areas of deprivation, and you'll probably hear me talk about that a little bit. Because it has an impact, doesn't it, on home learning and access to devices and internet. So, you know, we've used G Suite for approximately around 2 years. Our adoption varies between academies, although generally speaking, you know, most staff are using it in certain ways, but maybe not through Classroom prior to closure. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we've onboarded all those staff and got going. If we can just move on, that'd be great. So I created a very, very basic sort of home learning strategy, and it's not groundbreaking or anything like that. And I've sort of condensed into 4 steps. The first step was making sure that whatever we choose, we get access for all students. And that's really important because certain platforms are not device agnostic. So we've got those issues to deal with and so on. So once we've sort of worked out, you know, our students going to be able to access whatever platform we choose, we then need to look at making sure we've got high quality resources for home learning. And I think that's very, very different. And I know Glyn will talk about that in terms of what you may normally use may not be appropriate in this situation. And then making sure we support staff in implementation. How can we make sure that staff are upskilled enough to feel confident to use the tools at the disposal for whatever platform? And obviously we have used G Suite for this. And then finally, making sure we've got clear communication channels with both students and parents. So what I want to do is just explore them in a little bit more detail and give some sort of advice and tips. And it's not stuff that you can't use going forward because obviously we're closed now. It's maybe things you can maybe implement. So if we have a little look at step 1 and move on, that'd be great. Okay, so step 1 is all about access for all. Now, because we work in areas of deprivation, generally speaking, we need to make sure that young people have access to whatever we're setting, and we can't assume that all students have access to ICT at home through a traditional means such as a laptop, Chromebook, or computer. But we can make a bit of an assumption that most will have some form of smartphone, and that was a big driver for us. So G Suite's device agnostic. So what we did is we used teacher knowledge to see who they already know does and doesn't have access at home. We created drop-in sessions for students if they wanted like a confidential chat to say, oh, I've not got access to IT. And then we did something a little bit smart, which was create an e-safety questionnaire for students to complete. But hidden within that was questions about ICT access. So they were telling us what they had access to at home. And we could then work out which students maybe don't have that access. And then what we did is to make sure that all students had their logins, if they weren't regular users in school because of the subjects they maybe took, that we made sure that they had their login so they could access it. So that was the first step. Moving on to the second step then, is making sure we've got high quality resources. And we're really fortunate in our trust that we've got a team of subject directors, of one of which I am for computer science. So what we did prior to any closure is got all those colleagues together in a room and said, right, let's create some high quality resources to support our staff that in event of a closure, they are able to already have some materials based around the principles of home learning together to make them feel more comfortable, so they don't have to learn how to generate resources in a new way and learn, for some of them, a new platform, but actually they can just focus on making sure the work's out there. And Glyn will talk about this in more detail, but it's about getting students unstuck when they get stuck and how you might go about that, so that the teacher might not always be there like they would in a classroom. So how do students, if they hit a wall, get unstuck? We focused on and continue to focus on consolidating prior learning, not new learning. There will be some students that don't access what we've put out there for them for a variety of reasons, and what we don't want to do is widen that gap. And I know the government are really sort of on top of that at the moment in terms of how do we make sure that the disadvantage gap doesn't widen in this crazy world that we're in at the moment. Try to make self-marking activities. That's great, because it decreases staff workload and it gives instant feedback for staff, and a variety of activities to keep engagement. So we had the subject directors using those key principles to generate resources prior to closure to support staff. So then moving on to step 3 was how do we support staff? So whilst most were using maybe Google Drive, there was a wide variety in those that were actually using Google Classroom. So it was about how do we gain their confidence as soon as possible, so that they, even though they might be isolated at home, feel confident and can do these things. Now, the Google's Teacher Centre is absolutely fantastic, but sometimes staff need a little bit more hand-holding and want to feel like it's personalised to them. So we created an internal support website, which was our own OGAT G Suite Training Centre, with key videos on. And dedicated some CPD time in our normal development time to make sure that maybe those concerns that they may have are sort of eliminated. And then we tried to streamline the population of classes, because if they've not used Google Classroom before, because maybe their subject doesn't normally cater for it in that way, like, I don't know, year 7 PE, for example, we created a way with our internal systems to really quickly populate the classes, so that if you had 7 classes of 30 year 7 students, you're not going to be there for ages trying to add students. And we were conscious that we want to add them into the classroom and not rely on the join codes, because that meant getting them into the classroom. And then on to sort of the final step, really, which was how do we make sure parents and students know our approach for home learning? And this was quite straightforward, really. We kept it simple. We had one port of call for all the information. So we just created a Google site together, and all the communication through text, letters, all pointed towards that site. So if you need any information, go here. If you need any information, go here. And that was key for parents. And on there, we put some support materials for parents, just some basic videos of how to communicate and how students may need to use Google Classroom and how they as parents can support their child. And for students, we created an assembly and had assemblies with every year group before closure for any that weren't overly familiar with Classroom because of the subjects that they didn't need it, but already a lot were up and running, so it wasn't a big shift. So what I'm hoping there is there's some very brief sort of tips and guides on from a sort of strategic level across a school or even a multitude of schools about how you could continue to evolve and adapt your approach to sort of home learning and communication and support with it, because we continue to do that. We haven't just done this and then left it. We continue to evolve what we're doing and our support and so on. So I think at this point it's probably worth handing over to Glyn, who will talk from a teaching and learning point of view, specifically with sort of top tips for Classroom and what she's found from talking to teachers. So if we just move on a couple of slides, probably.
Hi there. So I would say that one of my top tips would be for doing the quizzing, using Google Forms and setting it up as a quiz. It's really good for student engagement, especially when you set it up to give feedback straight away. It's also really good at reducing workload for staff, because obviously it's self-marking. I've done in the past some tests on there as well, so assessments, and if you've got multiple choice questions, it's nice and easy. But then as a teacher, I would just go back and mark the longer questions, and it's just having that sort of engagement with the students, and you can use spreadsheets on that to analyze the the gaps in the student knowledges, and that helps with your future planning. It's already been mentioned today, but it's about when you're setting assignments, to make sure you're making a copy for each student. It just makes it easier for file management, and then it's easier to actually find the file again. What I like about Google Docs is the fact that it is actually live, and you can see version controls. So students claiming that they've done more work. I've had in a lesson, for example, students saying, "Oh, I've done loads of work," and then I've looked at the version control, and I can see they've only done 5 minutes worth of work in that 20 minutes or something. So once they realize that you can track it, it can really help with your classroom management. And I know at the moment I've been in conversations with parents about how much work has my child done, and then I've shown them how to do that feature, and they've looked, and they can actually monitor how much work the student's doing at home. With the school closures at the moment, I think the biggest the biggest way that I'm communicating with students is through the comments at the side. So I'm going through the classroom, looking at assignments. If they haven't done the work, I'm commenting and saying this assignment still needs to be done. I'm asking them if they need any help. They're messaging me through there. I get notifications through my email, so I can respond quite quickly. It's helped to engage with the students. So my other tips would be, I only just learned this the other day, but it's really important, is on Google Classroom, you've got the announcements on the first page, the streams. And I found that students go there to find their lessons or find the assignments. And so they can easily miss out on it. And I would be telling them to go onto classwork tab and go on there, because it's much more organized. It's organized into topics. It's much easier to find things, but they still weren't really doing that. They were still using the stream. And I explained how the stream works, but they were still going for that as their default setting. But you can go into settings and you can change it so that it's only announcements and not assignments on that stream. So that makes the students go into classwork to look for the work, and then they can see things in topics. So at the moment, I've got work set as a topic that says home learning. So I've got my previous work in the classwork, but they can actually see the stuff that's put into the home learning. I've just talked about topics there as well. It was shown earlier, but putting the assignments into topics just makes it easy to navigate. Sorry, the dog's barking. The next one I would say is making sure that every single activity that you upload has got something to allow them to be unstuck. So maybe it's a YouTube clip, maybe it's modeling some answers, maybe use a visualizer, or go through how to get unstuck if they do, because otherwise you're going to end up with lots more comments, or they'll become unmotivated and not actually want to do the task if they can't actually help themselves out. The biggest thing that I've been pushing with my academy at the moment is the expectations. I think the first couple of weeks of the school closures, there was a bit of a panic about getting work up onto Google Classroom. A few teachers not really understanding the differences between maybe PDF files and how they can't be edited. And they sort of said to students, "Oh, put work," said, "Do the work in your exercise books," but then you can't track it. And as time's gone along, people have become much more savvy with making sure it's Google Docs or Google Slides, so they can edit, they can check students' work, and they maybe have done too much work for the students, because what would take a student an hour in a lesson here, like we're in a classroom with your teacher helping you, would actually on their own take a lot longer. There's more distractions, and that they haven't got other people, their peers, to help them. And with that, I would chunk activities, maybe make a mixture, have a video, maybe have a Google Slides, maybe have a document to do, and just have different activities. The other thing is with our work-life balance at the moment, I would be trying to make sure that you're not trying to mark everything. Use the Google Forms and quizzes, and use things like that. Rubrics looks great. I've not used that before, but I'm definitely going to try that out myself. And recording a video using something like Screencastify of you walking through a worksheet and explaining answers allows students to self-mark, which obviously reduces the workload. And that's everything really from me. Ben, do you have anything else?
No, I think there's a lot of really good points there. And I think the key with anything I've always found with G Suite is experiment, because there's so many ways to do things that just increase efficiencies and also help engagement with students. So that's just an overview really of what we found in terms of top tips for using Classroom so far, and also our sort of holistic approach across a number of schools. So if we want to hand back to, I think, Jem at this point.
Yep. Hey everyone. So thank you so much, Glynis and Ben, for those top tips and explaining how this works with your schools. I think it's really useful to hear from you guys first. Is there anything else you'd like to share in terms of just making sure that teachers and even parents feel supported? Are there any other top tips you would give for parents as well?
I have one actually. This is actually more for students. When they're trying to manage their workload, they can use the to-do list at the side of Google Classroom. But actually, the calendar is really useful. So I've been trying to make sure that all staff are setting deadlines, because then all the assignments come up in the calendar, and in this sort of time, it's really hard to for students to manage their work. So when I've been in touch with parents, I've said, if you get your child to go onto Google Classroom and show them the calendar, and then they can see what work they've got to do for Monday, for Tuesday, for Wednesday, and it's really helped them manage their time, and also for parents to be able to check that they're doing the work. It's a really useful feature.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Glynis.
And I think for me, one of the things that I've experienced quite a lot of questions regarding is particularly those that you shared devices with students. We've got emails saying, they can't access this Google form, or they've got no classrooms. And what that is that's because that their parent or sibling might have just a Gmail account that they're signed into. So it's about just raising that awareness of make sure you know that you have to be in the right account, and the easy way to get around it is just to sign out of all and then sign into one, or have your Chrome sign into your Chrome browser. And I think that's a common misconception that you quite often get queries, they've not got any work, or it's not that well that they have, but actually it's just because they're on the wrong account.
Awesome. Those are definitely important tips. Okay, so I'm going to pass it over to Emma to do a little bit more on rubrics now that we have some time.
Hi, thank you. So we had a lot of really great questions in the chat about rubrics. So I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail for everyone. Back in our classwork tab in Google Classroom, when I'm creating a new assignment, again, after I give it a title, for some reason, an English teacher, I can't think of any other assignment besides an essay. So this will be another essay. In our right-hand column at the very bottom, that was our rubric tab for us to open or create a new rubric. So I'm going to go all the way back to the basics, and let's talk about how to create a new rubric. When I click this, my first option is to create a rubric. It will give me this rubric screen. And the first thing I have is a criterion title. So what is the first criteria I'm grading for in this assignment? So in an essay, I'm usually starting with the introduction, and then a detailed description of what exactly am I looking for in a good introduction, right? So I talk to my students about a hook and a summary a lot of times in my introduction. Obviously, you can go into a lot more detail than that. And then below this, we have the option to give point values. You can give any number of point values that you want by selecting first the number of points. I always like to start with the total maximum points. So maybe for each section, you can gain 10 points. And then by clicking this plus sign, I could then descend to 8 points, 6 points, 4 points, and so on and so forth. And then for each, I can say very specifically what that level is. So I use an achieved, an approaching, a reaching, and a beginning. This is kind of the standard that I use in my classroom. But you might have a different kind of system for how you quantify and qualify achievement. And then even within those point values, I can get really specific about what it takes to achieve 10 points. You have a detailed hook and descriptive summary, right? And then back here, you can also describe what it might look like to get each of those point values. Then when I'm ready to add a new criteria, bottom left-hand corner, this big plus sign, I can create a new section. So the next section might be the body of the essay. And then I might create a new section for the conclusion. However, one really nice feature within rubrics is within each criteria section, if you turn your eyes to the top right, you see these 3 dots. I like to call them the stoplight. Some people call them the snowman. When you click those 3 dots, you can either delete that criteria, you can move it up or down, or you can duplicate the criteria, which I always do because I'm usually using the same descending point system. And then all I have to do is change the title and the description. So that's a couple of tips in terms of creating the rubric itself. Let's see if it will let me save this. It's not going to let me save it without creating the point values for each, but we can pretend I saved that. And then once that rubric is created within any class that you have, you'll always be able to reach back and reuse that rubric in any other class. So again, if I click rubric plus and reuse rubric, I can, at the very top, you'll see there's a drop down. This will allow me to select any one of my Google Classrooms, whether it's current, whether it's archived from the past, and I can grab a rubric, edit, and reuse it from any time in any class, in any assignment. So having like a standard essay rubric, having a standard project rubric that you make one time and then are able to reuse again and again by simply clicking in, clicking select, and then that little icon is exactly what your students will see. Once again, the 3 stoplight dots will allow you to edit that rubric. Jem, were there any other questions that came up?
Oops, no, that was the most pressing question. And if anyone has anything else, please put it in the chat and we'll have Andy and the rest of the team join you. Oh, there's one more. When would I post a private comment down the side of an assignment? Is the student notified of this?
That's a great question. So usually I'm posting private comments for kind of a summary of the work. So I'm giving specific comments within the assignment, like capitalize and check your spelling. I'm using the rubric for kind of broad categorization of points. And then a private comment, you can kind of summarize. I say things like, great job. I can really see you're improving in this area. I would love to see you work a little bit more on your descriptive details. That's just a way for you to communicate anything really specific to that student. They will get a notification of that comment, and they can also respond in a private comment in the assignment as well directly to you.
And just to answer a sort of a probable follow-up question about notifications from Classroom. So in Google Classroom, obviously imagine if you're teaching lots of students and lots of classes, when you go back to that first page, classroom.google.com, on the left-hand side menu, you can alter the notification settings there. So obviously you want your students notified a lot, but if you're in maybe 30 classrooms because you're head of department, you might want to tone down the email notifications coming out of Classroom. And you can do that in the Classroom settings. So you don't have to receive notifications for everything. You can choose which ones come out. And that's on the main page of Classroom, on the settings area, you can alter your notification schedule.
One more from Jasmine. Can you use the same scoring for another assignment?
Yes, absolutely. So that was when I showed that reuse rubric button. You can just reuse that on a new assignment. Absolutely. And you can use it exactly as is. Or again, in that top right, there was the little snowman. You could edit and customize to the new assignment.
Great. I'd like to bring everyone back if possible. Great. Awesome. We have a few more minutes, and I just want to have everyone go around and just say maybe words of encouragement, right? We've done tips and tricks and we've answered questions, but just words of encouragement for our educators out there during this time to help give them some, you know, a little bit of encouragement.
Who wants to start? Shall I start?
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
So I was going to say, in terms of Google Classroom, there's obviously a lot of functionality in there, and we've had questions about rubrics and questions about the different sections. But in reality, a lot of teachers start really simply with Google Classroom, which is start on that stream page in that space of just communicating between you and your class, and then maybe adding a simple assignment in there. So it builds up over time. Don't feel you have to use, all of the features on day one and go and put a rubric leveled assignment in there with original answer reports and everything else turned on. Just start really simply. That'd be my sort of top tip, and then just get confident with the platform.
Let's give it to Emma next.
I would say that as much as possible, look at this as an opportunity to kind of invest in new knowledge for the future. All of these tools that we're showing you, especially Google Classroom, end up being such time savers for a teacher that although this is a little crazy and overwhelming right now, if you can take this time to really learn about these new tools, when you go back to the traditional classroom and are able to continue using them, they can really help save you so much time and energy in your teaching. So my words of encouragement are just think of this as a learning opportunity and an investment, and I think it will continue to help you further on. So it might be a little bit of a silver lining to the situation.
Ben?
Yeah, Emma's basically just said what I was going to say. But I think that's absolutely right. From my perspective of about 3,000 staff, I think what surprised me is those that were really a little bit shaky to begin with, that hadn't used it a whole lot. It's about doing the basics first, which is sort of what Andy was saying. There's a lot in Classroom, just get the basics nailed and then go from there and then use it as an opportunity to learn. It's not that we're not busy now. We are very busy, but it's also a very different type of working where normally you might be in front of students 22 hours a week. You might still be setting work for 22 students, but you've got that flexibility a little bit in your working now, and that gives you an opportunity to learn, try things and develop. And I think that would be my key message. Just try stuff out. You can't break it. I think Google pay people to break it, don't they? So just try things out, see how you get on and go from there, really.
Glynis, last one.
Yeah, everyone said it really, but it is just trying it out, and I think the more you do it, you get more confident. I'd say like 3 years ago, I didn't know how to use any of these features, and now everyone comes to me for advice and to help them out with everything, and I'm quite proud of how quickly staff have just got onto the sort of Google bandwagon, so to speak, and embraced it, and I'm excited for when we do return back and how much they will use that in the future. Already I'm thinking about when students are absent from school now, they'll be in the habit of going onto Google Classroom and accessing the work that they might be missing from school. So there's lots of different ways that students can engage in it, and it doesn't have to be a teacher who's got access to computers in the classroom, because as this is showing, home learning, homework, and all other ways for students to engage with Google. That's great.
Thank you. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone on the call today, as well as to our educators out there. Just a little bit words from myself. I really want to thank you for taking the time to almost like switch the work that you're doing and making sure that your students continue their learning and don't miss out during this time. And I know it's a bit difficult, and you're joining the webinars to make sure that you're well equipped, and that shows that you care about your students' education. So really thank the educators out there as well as the trainers on this call. So I'm going to leave it at that. I want everyone to join us on our next webinar. Make sure you go to the bit.ly link, GFE UK webinars, to see past webinars and the current ones that are coming up. And also register for our virtual staff room if you have any questions for senior leaders or if you have questions as an IT admin. So thank you once again, and goodbye from Google for Education.